Good afternoon. Today we're here to talk about the current scandal at Volkswagen that has impacted our company and to introduce a change plan to address the scandal. We're going to talk about what prompted the need for us to change, whether or not the company is ready to change. We're going to talk about a model for creating the change. We're going to talk about addressing resistance to change. We'll talk about our communication strategy, and then finally we'll talk about sustaining the change once we've accomplished our goals. Volkswagen was founded in Germany in 1937. It has grown into an international company. It's Europe's largest automobile manufacturer, and over that time it developed a reputation for fuel-efficient, clean diesel vehicles. Unfortunately, in late 2015, the EPA and the California Air Quality Board discovered that Volkswagen engineers had introduced software to basically cheat emissions tests, and that the vehicles were not actually meeting the EPA targets for emissions. This cheating scandal impacts up to 11 million vehicles, and at $37,000 per vehicle, we're looking at a potential of $18 billion in fines. The scandal has also seriously hurt our stock price and our consumer brand image. According to YouGov consumer ratings, we've dropped 32 points in rankings of automobile manufacturers since the scandal erupted. It's also prompted our CEO to resign, and most recently, the president of U.S. operations resigned. Our chairman has acknowledged that there's something about the culture at Volkswagen that created a mindset that tolerates breaches of the rules, and that's what we need to address through our change program. Human resource management contributed to the scandal that we're facing. Our company, throughout its history, has had a top-down power structure that's very highly centralized in Wolfsburg, Germany, at our company headquarters. We also have a very generous incentive structure that, unfortunately, that rewards individuals and teams. But unfortunately, the team rewards tend to discourage dissent and don't create an environment where free communications are available. Our managers have basically used implied threats to say that if you can't get something done, then maybe you should look for another job. And that created an environment where our engineers felt that it was better to cheat than it was to actually admit that they were unable to meet the emissions targets without sacrificing efficiency on the vehicle. So basically what we need to do is to decentralize our power structure, flatten the power structure, create open lines of communication, and make sure that our rewards program is aligned with our company objectives. We also need to make sure that they reward ethical behaviors and punish actions that are not ethical. And we also need to make sure that throughout this change process, we involve key employee stakeholders in change planning, especially around the incentives program. Our company goals include corporate social responsibility and creating environmentally friendly products. Obviously, we're not achieving that during the course of the emissions cheating scandal, although sadly we were able to overcome the obstacles that we faced in terms of emissions and efficiency. But our engineers felt at the time that it was better just to keep on cheating than it was to actually deploy the solution. Our company tends to have a zero tolerance for failure, and that's reinforced through implied threats. And as I said earlier, we reward teams, which tends to discourage dissent and other opinions. All of the communication really is top down at this point, and that's what we really need to address through this program. Now, the way we're going to do this is we're going to use the Cotter 8-step model for change. The first 4 steps are designed to challenge the status quo and also to begin the change process. The first step is to create a sense of urgency, which really already exists. Everyone is aware of the scandal that we face and the problems that we face and the need to address them. And it's particularly relevant in light of our poor financial performance and the decline in our brand index. To further reinforce or to further create a sense of urgency, we need to reinforce the fact that if we can't recover our image or recover our sales, then people are going to end up losing jobs. So we need to build a coalition that starts at the top. Our leadership has already acknowledged a need for change. Human resources is essential in creating ethical standards and creating open communications and creating an environment where employees feel empowered to share their thoughts and opinions and to be able to express when things aren't going the way that the company would like. I think we should establish a committee to reinvent the incentive plans. Everybody receives incentives. Our incentive structure is very generous, and so we want to make sure that we include everybody who's impacted by the new incentive plans to make sure that they buy into it. Because if we just roll out a plan that nobody is in line with, then it's not going to be accepted by the employees. We also need to train our managers to be more employee friendly and more receptive to feedback. One of the things that we should probably do at first, because our people are not accustomed to giving feedback, is create an anonymous reporting system so that employees can report problems that they have or obstacles they face without fear of repercussions until we can build trust. Our vision needs to focus on ethics, open communication, creating a collaborative environment where everybody's ideas are considered, and we're receptive to the fact that sometimes things can't be accomplished in the time frame that we expect. We need to communicate this through multiple channels. Publicly, we've already acknowledged the need for change. Our next steps would be to meet with employees to share the new vision, to talk about the incentive structures and talk about the change plan. And then we can reinforce that through memos, team meetings, policy statements, and one-on-one conversations with employees. Steps 3 through 7 of the Cotter model include the developing the vision and strategy and communicating that we've already talked about. It also includes empowering broad-based action and generating short-term wins. Empowering broad-based action is supported by open two-way communications that we've talked about, including stakeholders in the development plans or the development of the change plans, letting them know that their input is valued, and involving them in that process gives them a stake in or an ownership in the outcomes. We need to flatten our organizational structure. That way employees feel more vested in future operational outcomes. Short-term wins reinforce the progress that we make through the change process. Some examples of short-term wins would be successful reinvention of the reward system, using input from all of the stakeholders, publicly recognizing employees who share ideas, completing all of the vehicle recalls from the emission scandal would be a huge win. Growth in our stock price would also be another short-term win, and improving our customers' perception of our company would also be another key short-term win. Sales growth is also a good indicator of progress. And finally, the resolution of the legal issues from the scandal would certainly be an important milestone. Using input from our newly empowered workforce can generate additional change. We certainly have the competencies to be successful. Our engineers, even though they couldn't, they struggled to meet the emissions and efficiency issue at first, they were able to eventually resolve the problem. We need to address the ethical concern about the fact that they opted not to deploy that, but I think that some of that may have been driven by fear that of revealing the fact that it had been cheated all along. So opening communication will alleviate problems like that, and it will also help to foster additional innovation. The final step in the Cotter model is to incorporate the change into the culture. Changes to organizational structure and incentive plans need to be incorporated quickly. Opening communication lines will take time, mostly because of the trust issues between the managers and the employees, and also because of the fact that our employees are just accustomed to an authoritative power structure. Once the open communication and the more collaborative work environment is a standard operating procedure, and employees recognize that their opinions and their thoughts and their contributions are being incorporated into the future of the company, all of that will become standard operating procedure, and that will be the indication that we've achieved our goal of incorporating the change into the company culture. One of the problems with change is resistance, and scholars who study change have identified a few key things that contribute to resistance to change. First is just people are accustomed to the status quo. Employees are likely to be fearful of change. They're very comfortable with top-down leadership. That's what they've existed with through the entire history of the company. And they're not very comfortable right now with communicating and offering dissenting opinions. Another key issue is parochial self-interest, which is basically the fear of losing more than what will be gained as a result of the change. That will be particularly notable with changes to the rewards plan. And also for managers, it'll be an issue because they're used to having a lot of power and they're unlikely to be willing to just give it up. Lack of trust is another source of resistance to change, and the threatening environment that our employees have lived under has certainly undermined trust, and that's something that will have to be addressed through the change process. And then finally, employees may assess the situation differently than leadership. They may fear that they're unable to develop the skills that they needed to succeed in the new environment. And they may feel that they face problems under the flatter, more collaborative environment. They may not be as comfortable being key contributors to the organization and its future. So what we need to do is open safe channels of communication. We talked about the anonymous reporting system. We need to recognize and reward employees who make suggestions that are implemented, and those will help to build trust over time. We need to involve stakeholders in all key decisions, especially around those that impact them directly, like the incentives plan. And we need to make sure that HR is involved in developing the incentive plan to ensure that the incentives are better aligned with what the company's actual goals are. We need to provide training and mentoring. We need to train employees to communicate better, and we need to train our managers to be more receptive to the opinions and the thoughts of the key employees in the company, and to be willing to incorporate their ideas. We absolutely cannot use coercion as a method for implementing the change. Because that would be contrary to the objective of eliminating our authoritative power structure and creating a collaborative environment. So in our communication plan, we need to make sure that employees are involved in the development of the plan, the overall change plan. We need to make sure that they're involved in the changes to the incentive plan because it impacts them significantly, and it will help minimize resistance by involving them in that process. Open communication needs to be formalized in policies. We need to establish an open door policy and enforce it. As I've discussed earlier, we need to make sure that there are anonymous lines of communication at first to alleviate the initial fears. Another way to open communication would be to create an internal company social media network. It's been shown that that helps improve communication and collaboration. It can help foster innovation, and it can help engage employees in the change process. And then finally, training may also be necessary to help develop confidence and communication skills. Next, we need to talk about sustaining the change once the changes have been implemented. Really, it's up to the company leadership to create the vision and to promote the changes, but it can't be completely driven by leadership throughout the process, because that's really inconsistent with our goals of creating a more collaborative environment. So instead of using a top-down approach, a better approach would be a catalytic approach, which is driven more by middle managers. It creates opportunities for collaboration from people at all levels within the organization. It can help employees understand the value that their changes, or that the change adds to the company. We need to incorporate their feedback and engage them to encourage their support for the change process. And then we need to make sure that as we roll out changes, that our processes and systems are redesigned in a manner that supports the change strategy. The changes need to become part of the company culture. Part of that is achieved through measurement and ensuring that throughout the process we're taking measures to ensure that the changes that we're making are being effective and that they're consistent with the goals that we're trying to achieve. To summarize, the emission scandal clearly demonstrates that change is necessary within the organization. Our current human resource practices, including our top-down power structure, incentive program, and overall culture, all need to change to prevent this type of scandal from happening again. We talked about the company's readiness for change, and while there are certainly some obstacles, we've outlined a plan to overcome, to ensure that we're ready. We developed a comprehensive and systematic strategy for creating and implementing the change. We've discussed the problems of resistance and outlined a strategy to overcome resistance. We've talked about how all of this will be communicated with employees, and developed a strategy to support that communication, or developed a communication strategy to support the change efforts. And then finally, we've discussed how these changes will be incorporated into the culture and sustained over the long term. Thank you for coming in today, and I have attached a detailed report that thoroughly addresses all of these, or I'm distributing a detailed report that addresses all of the things that we talked about in this presentation today. Thank you. Have a great day.